All right, hello and welcome to the Rankin Technical College Summer Adventure Academy at the Rankin Technical College Wentzville campus. This academy will be Android App Inventor, and as our thing here says, App Inventor lets you create applications for Android phones and tablets. This workshop will teach you what App Inventor is, how it is used, how the free associated software can be loaded into a computer. Students will create several apps. All right. Well, my name is Jeff Scott, and I will be your instructor for this academy. And as we start, what I'd like to do is go through this PowerPoint presentation I've made for you. Now, you're here, it's summer, probably the last thing in the world you want to do is to watch PowerPoint slides, so I'll try to keep this short and sweet, as they say. So, the key thing with using App Inventor 2 is you can write applications without having to write any code, and that's what we're going to be concentrating on this week. As far as what we'll be doing, I'm going to show you how to get started with App Inventor 2. We'll look at some associated URLs and some other information that you may want as you get started. And from there, we're going to build a minimum of 7 or 8 projects. We'll start very, very simplistically with a project that I call the All-American, which will have 3 buttons on it and allow our screen to be either red, white, or blue. From there, we'll go into a second project. It's the Boy Who Cried Wolf, and what it's going to basically be is it's going to allow us to show how speech is used. All right, this will be computer emulated speech is used. And sometimes, you don't like the way that computer emulated speech is. It sounds kind of cheesy. So in our third project, which is called Hello Kitty Doggy, we'll use built-in speech. All right, we'll actually grab sound files and use those. From there, we'll learn how to create our own little browser, if you'd call it that, which I called Rankin Plus. Next, we'll go in and do 2 versions of a guessing game where you will be able to come in and put in, guess a number between 1 and 100, and it'll tell you, the system will tell you if you're too high, too low, etc. From there, we'll actually create a working xylophone using Android App Inventor 2, and we'll end up with a Magic 8-Ball app. Now, one thing that was on there on the write-up that I'm not really planning on going over is that whack-a-mole, but I'll show you where there actually is a completed version of the project out there. And if there's any extra time after we go through all this, maybe we'll even make something else. All right. So, what's on your flash drive? Well, what's on the flash drive is this presentation and a lot of built-in steps and instructions, etc., on how you can go and load this software on your own computer if you'd so like. When we get done on the last day, we'll talk about where we can go from here. So, what is App Inventor 2? Now, notice the first thing it says there is it's open source, which means that no one technically owns it. You can download all of the associated code for Android App Inventor 2 if you want to. Now, App Inventor 2 was originally created by Google, but it's been taken over and is now maintained by MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The key thing, as we talked about, it allows newcomers to computer programming to create software applications, more often known as apps, for the Android operating system without knowing how to code. So you can create applications that will run on either an Android phone or an Android tablet without any knowledge of how to code, even if you've never coded before. Now, I'm not going to go to any of these, But I do want to mention, if you look at the first three, you'll notice that they all start with appinventor.mit.edu/explore. That's where the magic, so to speak, is, and that's where the main site is for you to find out everything that's App Inventor 2. In addition, right here, they've got a thing called Course in a Box. I could have decided to teach you Android App Inventor 2 by just going out to that Course in a Box, and go over that with you, but I decided it'd be better off if we create our own applications. If you want to know how to set up App Inventor 2, this is a URL for how to set it up on a Windows machine. There are similar URLs out there, so that if you want to set it up on, let's say that you've got an Apple, so you've got a Mac, maybe you've got a, whatever, a MacBook Pro or whatever, or you've got a Linux box. You can also set App Inventor 2 up on either one of those kinds of machines. But since we're using Windows machines for the class, and since probably the majority of you are using Windows machines, I don't like to suppose anything, that's the associated URL. Now notice it says here, note this has already been done on your machine. Now when you go in and you want to start App Inventor 2, and we're going to do this as a class. So we're going to go out here to this App Inventor 2 Explore. And we'll click the button that says Create Apps. And then what it'll do is it'll ask what you want to sign in as. I've got a Jeff Scott RTC for Rankin Technical College at Gmail, but I want to actually sign in with a different account. All right, we'll go through that in just a little bit. But I wanted to go on and finish this up first. All right. When we do this and you get into App Inventor 2, I decided to show it to you like this because what I've found in the past is if I show people, and if the first thing that we do is I have you log in, I lose a lot of you. All right? Oh, no, listen, Jeff. No, you don't. I wouldn't. All right? After you log in, what you're going to see is your screen is kind of separated into 4 different components. And I'm going to show those in the next 4 slides. The first one that's here is this is way on the left-hand side of your Android App Inventor 2 screen, even though it's shown on the right here. And it's called your palette. Now, in other software applications, it's known typically as a toolbox. And it's going to be separated into areas. There'll be a user interface area, and these will be all the tools underneath there, a layout area, a media area, and there'll be other areas as well. Next, in the middle of your screen, you see what's called the design area, sometimes called the content area. It goes by different names. It really isn't that important, but that's where you will create your interface. Next, toward the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see something that's known as the components area. And every time you add anything from here and you put it in here, the associated name of that will go in here. Right now it just says screen 1 because that's what you've got right here is your screen. All right. Then finally, every time you add something to your component area, those components that you add will have their own properties. For instance, these are the properties that you have for your screen component. And we'll go over all this stuff. So if that confuses you, please don't let it. All right, so how do you get started? This is kind of a repeat of what we just looked at, but I want you to see it. This is what the entire screen looks like. So the way that you use this is the App Inventor Designer right here. There are going to be 2 buttons up on top, one that says Designer and one that says Blocks. We'll look at the blocks in just a minute. All right, but the designer has these 4 components that I just mentioned to you. Those being your palette, your viewer, your content area, your component area, and your properties area. As it says, you find your different components, And you literally, so if I wanted an image component, I would click right there and drag it over here. All right, then it would be on my viewer, my content area. If I did that, then image 1, which would be the magical name, would show over here. And if that was the active component, the information about image 1 would show right here. Now, if you notice, if you look on the screen here, and if you've never heard these terms before, please don't be thrown by them. They're not that big a thing. There are 3 components in our viewer area here. There is our screen component. There is what's called a text box component, where you can either enter information and or you can display information, and there's a button component. And our active component is our text box component. How do I know that? Because it's the one here with the box around it. So in our components area, it shows our screen 1 component, and it shows that inside of there we have a text box component and a button component. By default, as you pull components out, they're just called text box 1, text box 2, text box 3, etc. Button 1, button 2, button 3, etc. Since the text box 1 is the component that's our active component, these are the properties of that particular component. Okay? Now again, as I mentioned, we're in the designer right now. You can also be in what's called the blocks area, and that's this right here. This is where you come probably as close to possible to writing code. Although again, you don't technically write code in here. This is called the blocks editor. You end up creating applications in Android App Inventor 2 by doing the equivalent of putting puzzle pieces together. So when you switch from designer to blocks, this becomes your blocks editor window. Over here are all the different blocks that you can add over here. Now, if you remember on the previous slide, we had a button here, right there. Okay? And, whoops, don't know what happened there. But when we brought our button in, okay, then we said, basically, when we click this button, what do we want to have happen? Don't worry about the code that's there. It'll make much more sense once we get into this. But what I want to go over with you again, and I don't know why this is going so nuts here, but what I want to go over is, again, this is your designer window. And I talked to you about the 4 components. We'll talk about what these buttons here mean in just a bit. We'll talk about what these menu items here and here mean. But you switch back and forth between designer mode and I'll call it code mode. But most books call it block editor mode by clicking these 2 buttons here. All right? And again, if that doesn't totally make sense to you, please bear with me because I really and truly believe that it will. All right. Other things, other important URLs for you. I mentioned this before, this course in a box. I'm not going to go over any of this. But what they have here, and we could have done it this way, is, as mentioned there, it's a full course in a box. They have you go over a bunch of their own modules as far as how to do this. And as I already mentioned, and I'm saying it again, if we're done with this course and you decide you'd like to learn more, I went too fast, or there just really wasn't enough time in the course for us to go in and get everything in the course that you wanted to get out of it, let's say. Well then, on your own, you can go out to here, which is http://www.appinventor.org/content/course-in-a-box/intro/course-in-a-box. Now, this is not case sensitive, even though it shows it here. And if you do go out there, there will be 7 different modules that you can go through. Again, I have gone over this, and it's not that they're badly written, they're written very well. I thought it would make more sense for us to go through this in something that I wrote. All right? Also, and I took some of this stuff, kind of gleaned some of the stuff I'm doing from here. There is an online textbook. Online meaning that it's free, it's out there, you can use it. So let me hit enter a couple times here. And it's right there. So if you go out to http://www.appinventor.org/book2, all right, there is this book which you also have a copy of on your flash drive. That book has 24 different chapters in it. This is where you can find that mole mash, that guacamole program, and there's a bunch of other ones here. I went over this. I made some changes to the Xylophone app because I kind of liked what they did. But virtually everything that we're doing is not in here. But it's a great resource, and it's a great place for you to look if you want to add to your knowledge of this. All right, so again, in just a couple minutes, we're going to create our first project. I do want to mention, if you look at these names and you've got All-American, I either have to write an underscore in between All and American, or else put it all together as one word. When you create a project in App Inventor, you can't have blank spaces in it. So this is All underscore American. We'll do that first. Then we'll do boy underscore who underscore cried underscore wolf. Then we'll do hello underscore kitty underscore doggy. Then we'll do Rankin underscore plus. Then guessing underscore game underscore V1 for version 1. Then guessing underscore game underscore V2 for version 2. Then xylophone and magic underscore 8 underscore ball. And again, if there is time, we'll go out and do even more than that. So as mentioned, that App Inventor 2, Create Your Own Android Apps PDF, that book that I just showed you, that's on your flash drive. A portion of each of the projects we created today is out on your flash drive. These PowerPoint slides are on your flash drive. There'll also be a link to all of these particular lectures that we'll be going over on your flash drive, and actually 2 links. So where do you go from here? What do you do when you're all done? You'll be able to add to, if you want to, every project that we create in here. You'll be able to change colors, make fonts bigger or smaller, etc. You should be able to create some of your own apps when you get done. If you also want to, you can go out to what's called the Classic Gallery of App Inventor. And what's out there, well, I'll have to fix that. It looks like a dead link. But what's out there are built-in App Inventor apps that other people have done that you can look at. Also, App Inventor has a really good forum. So if you've got questions about how to use App Inventor, etc., you'll be able to do that. All right, the last thing that I want to show you before we actually get started here, let's see if I can find it. There we go. I've got this short little thing here, and it's short. It's about 7 pages long or so, 10 pages long. And it's called Setting Up App Inventor. Now, I often do this. I go out to a lot of different websites, and I grab the information from them. Then I go and put that stuff into a Word document or a PDF. I could have saved this as a PDF as well. In fact, while I'm doing this, I'll do that right now. And let's just throw it out on the desktop. There. So there it is as a PDF. All right. So it says you can set up App Inventor and start building apps in minutes. The designer and blocks editor run. This is what's important. Everything that you create in Android App Inventor gets saved to the cloud. In other words, it gets saved out to the internet, which means that technically, even though it's yours, other people who know what they're doing, or maybe don't know what they're doing, can view your work. If you wanted to see your app on a device, you'll have to follow some of the steps that are shown below. And I don't want to mention that, but I do want to show you this. These are the system requirements. So you need either a Mac, a Windows machine, or a Linux machine. If you're using a Windows machine like we are, notice it goes back and it supports back through Windows XP. We have Windows 10, I believe, on all these machines, so we'll be fine. You use a browser. Now, I'm going to use Chrome for everything that we do. Many people are comfortable using Firefox, but I do want to mention, unless this has changed very recently, and to my knowledge, it is not. Android App Inventor 2 is not currently supported on Microsoft Internet Explorer, and I believe it's also not it's not supported for Edge, which is Microsoft's newest browser. All right. We're going to be using the on-screen emulator. We'll talk a little bit later, or actually show you that in here, how you could actually add things to your phone, but we're not going to worry about that. Not everybody in here may even have a phone, and if you do, many of you in here may have an iPhone. This stuff does not work with iPhones. If you want to work with iPhones, you typically end up building your projects on a Mac or an Apple machine, and instead of using Android App Inventor 2, you use either a language called Swift, which is the one used most often, or a different language used called Objective-C. Now next they go through how to install and run the emulator. I'm not going to run through that with you, but I show you this in case you want to do this. So this shows how you install App Inventor on both Mac, Windows, and Linux. I'm supposing here you did Windows, so you did that, and you're going to see this in just a couple minutes. We're going to launch the AI starter file. You only have to do that for Windows or Linux. The file is already built into Mac, so if you're using a Mac, you don't have to worry about doing that. This is the way the file is going to look. It looks like an old DOS file, and we just have it run in the background. This has to be running for Windows and Linux while we're running our App Inventor 2. Once we get it all open, we'll start creating projects, and we'll start connecting to the emulator. And you're going to see this in just a couple minutes. The emulator on here hopefully will have few to little to no problems with it, but the emulator can be what I like to refer to as a little bit hinky. And what I mean is different things can happen. So you'll also learn in here about some of the other stuff that's in here. Okay? All right. Once you start the emulator, this is what's going to end up happening in the background. You don't have to worry about it because we won't be looking at that file. It says the emulator will initially appear with a black screen. When it's ready, it'll look, for lack of better words, kind of like a phone. If it's the first time we're using the emulator after we install our setup, we'll see a message asking us if we want to update the emulator. Shouldn't be an issue in here. If it is, I'll run through it with you. Finally, I'm not going to go through this right now, but as you can see on this page here, they talk about how you can share and how you can package apps. We will look at that a little bit later, so that if you decide you want to copy everything you're working on to your own computer, or copy it, make a zip file of it and copy it to your phone and to other people's phones so they can use what you work on, you'll be able to do that as well. They go through some of the steps in here. Again, I'm not going to walk you through those right now. All right, so as far as I know, we're just about ready to get started, and we'll do that in the next video.